Hi, fellow Django developers. Ezekiel here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that helps you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone if you find this video important. Let's get into it. So today we are going to look at how we can work with static files in Django, right? Like static files, we mean like your JavaScript files, your CSS files, and like external files and images files, right? External files that you can load into your HTML file, into your template files, right? So to get started, in Django, in your settings.py file, just like most things, just like your login redirect URL, your logout redirect URL. So if you want to work with static files in Django, there are settings that you have to set in your settings.py file to help Django understand how to render and how to load the folder to load your static files from, right? So to tell Django that, if you check here, there is a setting already set, or if you check here, we have this static URL, right? So this static URL is the URL path that you want Django to load your static file from, right? So this is the URL. Like if for instance you have a static file called, let me say you have an image called logo.png, right? For instance, so when you want to load this logo.png, right, what we are trying to say here is that Django should specify the URL as maybe your host. That's like, for now we are using localhost, right? So 127.0.0.1 port 88,000, right? Then we want to say slash static slash logo.png, right? So this static is used to tell Django which URL should be used to load our static files, right? So the next thing would be to tell Django where to find these our static files, right? So let's say for instance we have a folder here, a root folder here called static, right? And we want all our static file, and let's say we have another folder CSS, right? So inside we have CSS, maybe we have JS for JavaScript. Let's say for instance inside this CSS we have a file called styles.css, right? Styles.css, sorry, not cs, styles.css, right? So styles.css, and here we want to add our styles here, right? So if we say maybe we want a background color of black, right, so that this will be obvious. So we want a background color of black, right? If I can type, right? So we want a background color of black, right? So in our files we want the background color to be black, as simple as that, right? So in this we have to tell Django to look, why we want to tell Django that it should look for our static files inside this static folder, right? So to do that, there is a certain variable we have to set. The certain variable is static files des, right? So static files directories, right? So it will go into this list right here. This is a Python list. It will go into this list right here, and this list will contain directories where the static files should be found, right? So right now the directory where our static files are is in this static directory, right? Let me make this bigger, right? So our static files are in this static directory, in this static folder, right? So we want to say base there. So what's base there? Base there is a setting that Django comes with, that comes with Django. So this base there directory right here, if I can find it, let me say base directory, let's go up. So this base directory here is simply a directory that gives us the path to our project, right? So it gives us the directory to this folder right here, right? So what we want to do is that in our static files directory, right, we want to say that the path we want is this base there concatenated, right, concatenated with static, right? So what we are trying to say here is that the static files is found in this folder, right? This base there concatenated with this static, right, which is here, right? So to do this in the correct way, in the Python Django way, we say base there has a function called join path, join path, and which path do we want to join? Static, right? So it's just the same thing what we did before, but this one is much more accepted. This one is much more advisable to use, right? So right here, this is where our static files will load. So let me create another folder and call it image, right? Because we'll be loading a logo.png file from this image folder, right? For now, we have this stars.css, right? So we'll go to our header.css file. Let me close this, make this smaller so that you can see it. So what we want here is that we want to load this file right here. We want to load this stars.css into this header.html, right? Then every other, if you don't know about template inheritance, go and check the video in our tutorial in our absolute Django beginner playlist. I'll leave a link to it in the description, right? So we want to load this styles.css into this place, right? Then every other template file we inherit from this base.html. Then this base.html will now include this header.html, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the styles we load here will affect all our templates, provided they inherit from this base.html, right? So to load the static files, right, there is the template function in Django called static, right? You say load static, right? What this load static tells Django is that Django should load all our static files here, right? So if it loads the static file, then in HTML we use the length relationship is a style sheet, then the type is a text CSS, just simply how you load CSS file in HTML, right? Then the href, right? So this is the meat of the lesson. So the href will be this bracket, this static CSS stroke styles.css, right? So what does this mean? This means that we want to load this CSS file right here, right? And already we have told Django that our static files are in this folder, this static folder, right? So we come here, we load this static folder. After loading this static folder, we come here and tell Django that Django should load that this href right here is a static file. Now inside this static folder, we are trying to say this static file, that means Django will go into this folder, into this static folder. Inside this static folder, it will now find CSS folder. It will now load styles.css, right? Let's say maybe you are loading a JavaScript file. It will be maybe JS and maybe scripts.js, right? That means you have a file here called, inside this JS you have scripts.js, right? That's what it means, right? So when we have this should be style, of course. This should be CSS styles.css, right? So this is loaded, this CSS file is loaded. So fingers crossed, let's see if it will work. So if we come to our terminal and on our server, python manage.py run server, right? So we run our server. It's taking a little bit of time, patience. So our server is on. So if we go to our browser, open our browser, refresh, hopefully, so you can see that our static file has been loaded, right? So if we should inspect our file, let me make this bigger for you. If we should inspect, come to this header, let's go down, let me bring this down, come to this header, you can see that right here, right? Let me make this bigger. So you can see that right here, we are loading this file from /static/css/styles.css, which means that what I just said, and that means Django is using this static URL. This static URL is the URL path where our static files will be loaded from, right? So, and then it loads your CSS, your styles.css, right? So generally this is how you work with static files in Django. So I made a very simple image here that we can use for the logo, right? So if I come here and let me say I drag this image to this folder, this image folder, right? So let's rename this, let me rename this to logo.png, right? So logo.png is a very simple png file. I don't know why VS Studio Code is not loading images file, but the preview of the file should be here. I don't know why it's not loading. Or let me open it from Windows, right? So this is the image file, just a bookseller, then this icon looks very dumb, whatever. Of course we are learning with it. Let's continue, right? So we have loaded this into our directory, our project directory, right? So the next thing will be in this navigation bar. This is where we have this bookseller here, this title right here, this bookseller title right here. So we want to load, instead of this title, this simple text here, we want to load the image. So we'll say image source, we'll get back to this, then auth should be logo image, and that will be it. So what's the URL part? Maybe if you want to guess, you can pause the video. Let me give you maybe 1 second or 2 seconds to guess. 1, 2, right? So if you say the source should be this, right? Static image / logo.png, you are actually correct. Why? Because it will go to our static folder, go to the img folder, image folder, then load logo.png, right? So if we go back, fingers crossed, refresh, you can see this logo is looking too big, right? So let's style it. We say width is equal to 2m, and height, let's make it a square, 2m also. So if we go back and refresh, it's looking too small. Let's change it to maybe 6em, right? 6 emphasis size is too small. Let me make this 20em. So refresh, still too small. Oh, sorry for wasting your time, guys. Let's make this 80, right? No matter what it is, now we are leaving it. So if we refresh, you can see this logo right here, right? You can see this file right here. So generally, this is how you work with static files in Django. So let's just do, because in the next tutorial we'll be deploying our project on Railway, right? If you don't know about Railway, you can read about it before I upload that video. So if we go to, I want to do a little bit of cleanup. If you go to sign up, you can see here that if after a user signs up, the user is still on this page, right? So I want to change that. I want to redirect the user to the login page, right? So if we come here, if we sign up a user, let's say user 5, right? The password, let's say we enter a password, then the password again, we confirm the password, we say sign up. You can see that the user is still redirected to this page, but we don't want that. We don't want the user to be redirected to the login page, right? So to do that, we go to our views.py, in the users views.py. So right here, this is where we are implementing the logic. So after user sign up, after successfully creating the user, I want to redirect to login, right? Login, right? So because that's the name of our login URL path. So right here, that's the name of this URL path, login. Look at, that's the name of the URL path. So if we go back, let's go back to sign up again. Let's create another user. Let's say user 6, enter a password, confirm the password, sign up, right? So after successfully signing up the user, we are being redirected to the login user, to the login page, right? So user was created successfully, user creation was successful with a wrong spelling of successful, but who cares, right? So this is it, guys. This is how you work with static files. Like, subscribe, turn off the notification, In the next tutorial, we'll be looking at deploying on Railway. I don't think you want to miss that. So subscribe, turn off the notification, and that's it. Take care of yourself. Peace.